Your husband knew someone in this family was stealing from you, the stranger said as he slid a thick cream-colored envelope across the table at a crowded cafe in Manhattan. For a moment, I thought he had mistaken me for someone else. I stared at the envelope resting beside my untouched cappuccino, then looked back at the man standing in front of me. He appeared to be somewhere in his 70s, dressed in a charcoal wool coat despite the unusually warm October weather in New York. His silver hair was neatly combed, and there was something about his expression that unsettled me. Not hostility, recognition. Like he had known me for years, even though I had never seen him before in my life. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked quietly. I nodded slowly. "Who are you?" Instead of answering immediately, he glanced toward the cafe windows where rain streaked against the glass and blurred the traffic outside. Yellow taxis crawled through Madison Avenue while people hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas tilted against the wind. Everything outside looked cold and distant. "My name is Arthur Bennett," he finally said. "I worked with your husband for nearly 20 years. The mention of Michael's name hit me harder than I expected. Even after 8 months, hearing someone say his name still created that awful hollow feeling inside my chest. I lowered my eyes to the envelope again. My fingers suddenly felt stiff around the porcelain coffee cup. "Michael never mentioned you," I said carefully. Arthur gave me a sad smile. "There are many things your husband never mentioned because he was trying to protect you." The cafe noise seemed to fade around me after that. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of the espresso machine, conversations from nearby tables. All of it became distant, muffled beneath the sudden pounding of my heartbeat. I should have stood up and walked away. Any sensible woman would have. But something in Arthur's voice kept me seated there. Maybe it was the exhaustion that had settled over my life since Michael died. Or maybe it was the fact that deep down, I already knew something in my family had been wrong for a very long time. "Open it when you get home," Arthur said.
Softly.
"Not here." Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small brass key beside the envelope. "Your husband wanted you to have that too." I stared at the key in confusion. "What is this?" Arthur hesitated before answering. "A safety deposit box in Brooklyn."
Brooklyn.
Michael never went to Brooklyn. At least not that I knew of. My husband had been a man of routines. Midtown office. Upper East Side apartment. Sunday morning walks through Central Park. Everything about him had always been predictable. Safe.
Familiar.
Yet suddenly I was holding a key connected to a part of his life I had never heard about. "Mrs. Carter," Arthur said quietly, leaning slightly closer, "your husband discovered things before he died. About your money. About your family. About Vanessa." The moment he said my daughter-in-law's name, something icy moved through my stomach. Vanessa. Beautiful, polished, endlessly charming Vanessa. The woman who had spent the last 6 months insisting I sell my townhouse because living alone at 68 was too difficult. The woman who constantly reminded me that Ryan worried about me. The woman who had recently started asking strange questions about Michael's accounts and investments. Arthur straightened slowly. "Once you read what's inside that envelope, your life is going to look very different." Then, before I could stop him, he turned and walked toward the cafe door. I watched him disappear into the rain while my trembling fingers rested on the sealed envelope sitting between us like a loaded secret. And for the first time since Michael's funeral, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt fear. I did not open the envelope until nearly midnight. It sat on my kitchen counter for hours while rain tapped softly against the windows of my townhouse on East 74th Street. I kept walking past it as though ignoring it might somehow make the entire afternoon disappear. The brass key Arthur had given me rested beside it under the warm light above the stove, small and harmless looking, yet impossible to stop thinking about. By 10 o'clock, the city outside had quieted into that strange Manhattan silence that only happens late at night, when even the traffic seems tired. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and stood alone in the kitchen Michael and I had renovated 12 years earlier. White marble counters. Navy cabinets. The expensive coffee machine Vanessa insisted we buy because she claimed it made the house look modern. I suddenly hated the sight of it. Since Michael died, the house no longer felt like mine. At first I thought grief had caused that feeling. Now I was beginning to wonder if something else had changed long before the funeral. I finally picked up the envelope with shaking hands and carried it into the living room. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, while old jazz music drifted from the speakers Michael used to love. For a long moment, I simply stared at his empty armchair across from me. 8 months. 8 months since the heart attack that had taken him in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday morning. One minute, he had been complaining about the stock market while knotting his tie in the hallway mirror. The next, he was gone before the ambulance even reached the hospital. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have such a devoted family afterward. Ryan started calling more often. Vanessa began stopping by several times a week carrying soup containers and fake concern in her bright, rehearsed voice. "You should not stay alone in this giant house forever, Evelyn," she kept saying gently. "It is too much responsibility at your age." At first, I thought she was trying to help me, but over time, her visits became less comforting and more invasive. She asked questions constantly. Had Michael updated the will recently? Did I know where the investment records were?
Was I planning to downsize soon?
One afternoon, she even opened drawers in Michael's office while pretending to look for stationery. When I asked what she was doing, she laughed too quickly and said she was trying to organize things for me. I remember the look Michael used to give her sometimes during family dinners.
Brief.
Careful. Almost suspicious. At the time, I ignored it because Michael rarely criticized anyone openly. But near the end of his life, he became quieter around Ryan and Vanessa.
Distracted.
There were nights I woke up at 2 in the morning and found him sitting alone downstairs in his study, with paperwork spread across the desk. "Everything all right?" I would ask sleepily from the doorway. He always smiled. "Just business." I wanted to believe him. Maybe because after 42 years of marriage, believing him felt easier than imagining anything else. I slid my finger carefully beneath the envelope flap and opened it. Inside were copies of bank statements, transfer records, property documents, and several photographs. At first, the numbers meant nothing to me. Then I saw Vanessa's name. Again and again. Large transfers connected to accounts I had never heard of. Payments linked to one of Michael's old companies. Dates stretching back nearly 3 years. My chest tightened painfully as I turned another page and saw a photograph clipped to the back of one document. Vanessa standing outside a building in Brooklyn beside a man I did not recognize. She was smiling. Not the polished smile she used at charity events or family dinners. This smile looked different, relaxed,
Familiar.
Beneath the photo, in Michael's handwriting, were 5 words that made my blood run cold. "She thinks nobody is watching." I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's handwriting beneath that photograph. "She thinks nobody is watching." By 6 in the morning, I was sitting alone in the kitchen with cold coffee untouched beside me while the stack of papers remained spread across the dining table like evidence from someone else's life. Outside, New York was beginning to wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled down the street. A dog barked somewhere below my townhouse windows. The ordinary sounds of the city felt strangely disconnected from the storm building inside my chest. I picked up the photograph again and studied Vanessa's face carefully. She looked younger somehow, less polished, more relaxed than she ever appeared around our family. The man standing beside her was tall, dark-haired, maybe in his 40s, dressed in a navy overcoat. They stood outside a brick apartment building in Brooklyn beneath a green awning that read Marlowe Properties. I turned the photo over, hoping for another clue, but the back was blank except for a date written in Michael's careful script. February 14th. Last year. Valentine's Day. My stomach tightened painfully. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Business meeting. Charity event. Real estate investment. But deep down, another feeling had already begun creeping into my thoughts. The terrible realization that Michael had spent the final years of his life quietly investigating someone inside our own family. Around 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Vanessa. Her bright, cheerful voice filled the kitchen before I even had time to prepare myself. "Good morning, Evelyn. I was thinking about stopping by later with soup from that Italian place you like." I stared at the papers scattered across the table while forcing my voice to remain calm. "That is thoughtful of you." Ryan is worried about you, she continued smoothly. You sounded tired yesterday. Yesterday. Before the cafe. Before the envelope. Before my entire understanding of my family began unraveling. I am fine, I replied carefully. There was a small pause on the line. Are you sure? She asked softly. You sound different. The question sent a chill through me because for one brief moment, it almost sounded less like concern and more like suspicion. I looked again at the transfer records Michael had collected. Some of the amounts were staggering.
$22,000. $52,000.
One transfer close to $180,000. All connected through companies I had never heard of. Evelyn. Vanessa repeated. Did something happen? I swallowed slowly.
No.
I just did not sleep well. Her tone softened instantly again.
Warm.
Gentle. Perfectly controlled. You should not be alone so much. Ryan and I keep saying the townhouse is too much responsibility now. We found a beautiful luxury community in Connecticut last week. Private gardens. Full staff. You would love it there. The words landed differently now. Before, I heard concern. Now, I heard strategy. I suddenly remembered a conversation from 3 months earlier during dinner at Ryan and Vanessa's apartment overlooking the Hudson. Vanessa had been pouring wine while casually mentioning how valuable Upper East Side property had become. Honestly, she laughed lightly, your townhouse is probably worth more than most people make in 10 lifetimes. At the time, Ryan looked uncomfortable and quickly changed the subject. I thought nothing of it then. But now, every memory felt sharper, rearranged into something darker. I should let you rest, Vanessa said sweetly. Ryan and I love you, Evelyn. We just want what is best for you. After the call ended, I sat motionless in the kitchen for a long time. Then I reached for the final item still inside the envelope. A folded sheet of paper with Michael's name typed across the top. It was not a letter. It was a private investigator's report. And halfway down the first page was a sentence that made my hands begin to shake all over again. Subject appears to have gained access to family financial records through manipulation of elderly family member. For the next 3 days, I said nothing to anyone. I moved through my life carefully, almost mechanically, while the investigator's report remained hidden beneath folded sweaters in the back of my bedroom closet. Every morning I drank coffee beside the kitchen windows overlooking the street while pretending everything was normal. Every afternoon I answered Ryan's phone calls with the same calm voice I had always used. But inside, something had changed permanently. Once suspicion enters a family, it settles into every silence. I began noticing things I had ignored for years. Small moments, strange expressions, tiny fractures hidden beneath ordinary life. On Thursday evening, Ryan stopped by after work carrying flowers and takeout containers from my favorite Greek restaurant. He kissed my cheek quickly before setting the bags on the counter. Vanessa had a late meeting, he explained while loosening his tie. She sends her love. I studied my son carefully while he unpacked food into ceramic bowls. At 39, Ryan still looked so much like Michael that seeing him sometimes physically hurt me. The same dark hair beginning to gray at the temples. The same serious eyes. The same habit of rubbing his jaw when stressed. 4. One terrible moment, I wondered whether Michael had kept these secrets because he did not trust our son either. Mom? Ryan asked gently. You okay? I realized I had been staring at him too long. Just tired. He nodded sympathetically. You really should think about downsizing eventually. This house is enormous. There it was again. Casual. Repeated. Constant. The townhouse. Always the townhouse. I looked around the dining room while Ryan poured wine into our glasses. The crystal chandelier Michael insisted on buying during our 10th anniversary renovation. The oil paintings collected over 4 decades. The fireplace mantel crowded with family photographs. This house held every version of my life inside it. My wedding. Ryan's first steps. Christmas mornings. Funeral flowers. Yet lately everyone spoke about it as though it were simply valuable real estate waiting to be sold. Vanessa found a beautiful place in Greenwich. Ryan continued casually. Private staff. Security. You would not have to worry about stairs anymore. I forced a faint smile. I managed the stairs just fine. He laughed softly, but there was tension beneath it. You know what I mean. During dinner, I noticed him checking his phone repeatedly. Every time Vanessa texted, his entire expression changed slightly. Nervous, distracted, careful. It reminded me suddenly of Michael during the final year before he died. The same distant look during conversations. The same hidden anxiety. I remembered one particular night almost 18 months earlier. Michael and I had attended a charity gala downtown with Ryan and Vanessa. At some point during dinner, Vanessa excused herself from the table. 10 minutes later, Michael quietly stood up too. When they both returned nearly 20 minutes afterward, Michael looked furious. Not visibly angry. Michael was never loud. But his face had turned pale in that cold, controlled way it did whenever something deeply upset him. On the drive home, I asked if everything was all right. Fine, he answered too quickly while staring through the windshield. Later that night, I woke up around 3 in the morning and found him downstairs sitting alone in his study. Papers covered the desk. He closed the folder immediately when he noticed me standing there. You should be asleep, he said quietly. I remember laughing softly. Michael, what on earth are you hiding from me? At the time, he smiled and kissed my forehead. Nothing you need to worry about. Now, sitting across from Ryan at my dining table, that memory returned so vividly it made my chest ache. Michael had not been protecting himself. He had been protecting me. After dinner, Ryan stood near the doorway putting on his coat while I walked him out. Vanessa wants us all to have brunch Sunday, he said casually. Family time. Family time. The word sounded strange now. Artificial somehow. Before leaving, he hesitated for a second and glanced toward the staircase, leading upstairs. Mom, he said carefully, have you gone through Dad's office yet? My heart skipped once. Not really. You probably should soon, he replied softly. There are a lot of financial documents up there. Then he smiled, kissed my cheek, and walked out into the cold Manhattan night while a terrible thought slowly formed inside my mind. Ryan was not asking out of curiosity. He was trying to find out whether I had already discovered something. The following morning, I finally went upstairs to Michael's office. I had avoided that room ever since the funeral, partly because the grief still lived there, heavy and untouched, and partly because entering it felt too much like admitting he was never coming back. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar and old books as I climbed the staircase slowly, one hand brushing against the polished banister Michael used to refinish every spring himself. When I opened the office door, the room looked exactly the way he had left it 8 months earlier. His leather chair still angled slightly toward the windows, overlooking the street. Reading glasses folded neatly beside the desk lamp. Half-finished crossword puzzle resting near the edge of the desk. For a moment, I simply stood there breathing carefully, overwhelmed by the strange intimacy of abandoned routines. Then my eyes drifted toward the filing cabinet beside the bookshelf.
Locked.
Michael never locked anything from me during our marriage. Not until the final year. I walked slowly across the room and sat in his chair. The leather creaked softly beneath me. For the first time, I noticed tiny details that suddenly felt important. The missing family photo that used to sit beside the computer monitor. The empty space in the bookshelf where one of his financial binders had been removed. A faint scratch near the bottom desk drawer like someone had forced it open carelessly. I opened the top drawer first.
Pens.
Receipts. Old reading glasses. Nothing unusual. The second drawer contained tax folders and property records organized in Michael's precise handwriting. But inside the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a stack of legal pads, I found something that made my pulse quicken instantly. A small black notebook. I recognized it immediately. Michael carried it everywhere during the last few months before his death. Whenever I asked what he was writing, he always smiled vaguely and changed the subject. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened the cover. Most pages contained ordinary notes at first. Meeting schedules. Phone numbers. Reminders about medications. But halfway through, the writing changed. Short observations.
Dates.
Names. Questions. Transfer moved again. Ryan unaware? Need proof before confrontation. Then one sentence underlined twice in dark ink. Vanessa has access I never authorize. A cold wave moved through my chest. I turned another page. More notes. Brooklyn account connected to Marlowe. Arthur's still investigating. Must update Evelyn before it is too late. I closed the notebook for a second and pressed my hand against my mouth. Michael had known. Not suspected.
Known.
The realization hurt more than I expected because suddenly I understood how alone he must have felt carrying all of this by himself while pretending our family was still intact. A soft vibration startled me. My phone. Vanessa. I stared at her name glowing across the screen before answering carefully. Hello. Evelyn, sweetheart. Are we still on for brunch tomorrow? Her voice sounded warm and polished as always. I glanced down at Michael's notebook resting open on the desk. Of course. Wonderful. Ryan is excited to spend time together. Another pause. Then casually, almost too casually, she added, Did you ever organize Michael's office? I know paperwork can become overwhelming. My stomach tightened instantly. Not yet. Well, if you need help, I would be happy to come by. Financial documents can get confusing. There was something chilling about the way she said financial documents. Too careful. Too rehearsed. I suddenly pictured her standing in this very room after the funeral while I cried downstairs greeting relatives. Had she searched through Michael's drawers back then? Had she already been looking for this notebook? That is kind of you, I replied quietly. But I can manage. For the first time since I had known her, Vanessa's pleasant tone slipped slightly. Just for a second. You should not carry stress alone at your age, Evelyn. At your age. I had heard that phrase repeatedly these past months. Softly spoken, politely framed, yet always carrying the same hidden message beneath it.
Weak.
Vulnerable. Replaceable. After we ended the call, I sat motionless in Michael's chair staring at the notebook in my lap. Then I noticed one final line written at the bottom of the last page. Smaller than the others. Almost rushed. If Evelyn ever finds this, tell Arthur she will need the second key. Sunday brunch took place at Ryan and Vanessa's apartment overlooking the Hudson River. The building itself was the kind of Manhattan luxury that tried very hard to appear effortless. Quiet elevators, white marble lobby floors, fresh orchids near the concierge desk, everything polished to perfection. Vanessa opened the apartment door wearing cream-colored cashmere and a smile so warm it almost made me question everything I had discovered. Almost. Evelyn, she said softly, embracing me lightly. You look beautiful. I stepped inside slowly, carrying a bottle of wine I had no intention of drinking. The apartment smelled faintly of espresso and expensive candles. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the gray river outside, while soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Ryan appeared from the kitchen wearing one of Michael's old sweaters. The sight of it caught me off guard. Mom, he smiled, kissing my cheek. I am glad you came. For a few moments, everything felt painfully normal. Vanessa arranged pastries onto white ceramic plates while Ryan poured coffee. They spoke about ordinary things. Work deadlines. Restaurant openings downtown. A neighbor renovating his penthouse upstairs. I sat quietly at the dining table listening to them move through their rehearsed little life together, while Michael's notebook rested hidden inside my purse beneath the table. You seem tired, Vanessa observed suddenly, studying me over the rim of her coffee cup. Have you been sleeping? Not particularly well. That worries me, she replied gently. Stress can become dangerous at your age. Again. That phrase, always carefully delivered with concern wrapped around it like silk covering a knife. Ryan glanced awkwardly toward Vanessa before changing the subject. Mom, have you thought any more about taking a vacation? Maybe Florida for a few weeks during winter? I almost laughed at how transparent it suddenly sounded. Send Evelyn away.
Keep her distracted.
Keep her away from the townhouse. Away from the office. Away from the truth. New York is home, I answered calmly. Vanessa smiled patiently, as though speaking to a difficult child. Of course. But eventually you should think about what makes sense long-term. Long-term. The entire conversation felt choreographed now. Every sentence gently guiding me toward the same conclusion. Sell the house. Leave the city. Become smaller. Easier to control. Vanessa reached across the table and touched my hand softly. We only want what is best for you, Evelyn. I looked down at her perfectly manicured fingers resting against mine and suddenly remembered another moment from nearly a year ago. Michael's birthday dinner. Vanessa had offered to help clean up afterward while Ryan took a business call downstairs. I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly and found Vanessa standing near Michael's briefcase with several papers in her hands. She startled visibly when she saw me. Oh goodness, she laughed nervously. I thought this was Ryan's folder. At the time, I believed her instantly. Now the memory replayed differently in my mind. Not nervous embarrassment.
Panic.
Actually, Vanessa continued carefully, Ryan and I wanted to talk to you about something today. There it was. The real reason for brunch. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair while Vanessa reached for a slim leather folder sitting beside her plate. We found a wonderful financial advisor in Connecticut who specializes in retirement transitions. Retirement transitions. Such elegant language for slowly removing someone from their own life. Vanessa opened the folder and slid several glossy brochures toward me. Photos of elderly couples smiling beside lakes and manicured gardens. Luxury-assisted living communities disguised as resorts. The townhouse market is incredible right now, she said smoothly. You could sell, invest comfortably, and never worry about maintenance again. I turned one brochure slowly in my hands while pretending to consider it. Inside my purse, Michael's notebook pressed heavily against my side like a living thing. And what happens to the townhouse? I asked quietly. Ryan answered too quickly. Well, obviously the money would support your care. Obviously. I looked at my son carefully, then really looked at him. His tense posture, the way he avoided holding my gaze too long, the faint anxiety beneath every movement. For the first time, I realized something deeply unsettling. Ryan was afraid too. Not of me. Of Vanessa. Suddenly, the apartment door buzzer sounded loudly from the hallway wall. Vanessa frowned in confusion. Were you expecting someone? Ryan asked. She shook her head slowly and stood to answer it. A moment later, I heard her voice change completely. The warmth vanished instantly. What are you doing here? She whispered sharply. Then I heard another voice answer calmly from the hallway. Arthur Bennett. The entire apartment went silent the moment Arthur stepped inside. Vanessa stood frozen near the doorway, one hand still gripping the edge of the open door so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. Ryan slowly rose from his chair beside the dining table, confusion spreading across his face as he looked between Arthur and me. Arthur himself appeared. Calm, almost formal, dressed once again in that dark wool coat despite the mild afternoon weather outside. I apologize for interrupting, he said politely, though his eyes settled briefly on Vanessa with unmistakable recognition. But there are matters concerning Michael Carter that cannot wait any longer. Vanessa recovered first. Her smile returned so quickly, it almost impressed me. I think there must be some misunderstanding, she said smoothly. This is a private family brunch. Arthur nodded slightly.
Yes.
That is precisely why I am here. Ryan looked at me uncertainly. Mom, what is going on? Before I could answer, Arthur reached into his coat pocket and removed a sealed white envelope. Smaller than the first one. Thicker too. He placed it carefully on the dining table beside the untouched coffee cups and expensive pastries Vanessa had arranged earlier. Your husband asked me to deliver this only after Evelyn discovered the contents of the first package, Arthur said quietly. Vanessa's expression changed for just a fraction of a second.
Fear.
Real fear. Then it disappeared beneath polished composure. I honestly have no idea what this man is talking about, she said lightly while folding her arms across her chest. Arthur ignored her completely. Michael became concerned nearly 2 years ago after irregular transfers began appearing across several family accounts. At first, he believed someone inside the company was responsible. Ryan frowned. What transfers? Arthur turned toward him carefully. Your father did not want to involve you until he understood the full situation. I watched Ryan's face closely as Arthur spoke. Shock, confusion. But underneath both emotions was something else too. Relief. The kind of relief people feel when secrets they have sensed for months finally begin taking shape out loud. "This is insane," Vanessa interrupted sharply. "Michael trusted me completely." Arthur looked at her for a long moment before replying softly, "No, he did not." Silence settled heavily over the apartment after that. Even the city noise outside seemed distant behind the enormous windows overlooking the river. I lowered my eyes to the second envelope. Sitting in front of me, my hands felt strangely calm now as I opened it carefully beneath Vanessa's watchful stare. Inside was a flash drive, several legal documents, and a handwritten letter folded neatly in Michael's familiar, careful script. The sight of his handwriting alone nearly broke me. For a moment, the apartment disappeared completely. I was suddenly back in our old summer house in Cape Cod 20 years earlier, watching Michael write postcards at the kitchen table while ocean wind drifted through the screen doors. He always pressed harder on certain letters when emotional. I could see it now in the darker ink along the edges of my name. Evelyn. My dearest Evelyn. My vision blurred slightly before I forced myself to continue reading silently. "If you are holding this letter, then I was right to worry. I pray I was wrong about how far this situation had gone, but if Arthur delivered this to you, then events unfolded exactly as I feared. There are things about Vanessa I could never fully prove while alive, though I came dangerously close before my death." My pulse quickened painfully. Across the room, Vanessa had gone completely still. Ryan stared at me anxiously. "Mom," I looked up slowly from the letter. "Your father hired investigators before he died." Ryan blinked in disbelief. "Investigators?" Arthur answered quietly instead. "Michael discovered financial manipulation involving family trust accounts, property transfers, and unauthorized access to his private records." Vanessa laughed suddenly. Sharp. Brittle. "This is ridiculous. You are both making paranoid accusations without evidence." Arthur calmly pointed toward the flash drive still resting inside the envelope. "The evidence is there." For the first time since entering the apartment, Vanessa completely lost control of her expression. Her eyes locked onto the flash drive with naked panic. And, in that moment, Ryan finally saw it too. Ryan plugged the flash drive into his laptop with trembling hands while the apartment remained painfully quiet around us. Vanessa stood near the kitchen island, perfectly still except for the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. Arthur remained by the windows overlooking the river, calm and unreadable. I sat at the dining table with Michael's letter resting in my lap while Ryan opened the first folder on the screen. Financial records appeared immediately. Bank transfers, property documents,
White confirmations.
dates stretching back nearly 3 years. Ryan frowned deeper with every file he opened. "What is this?" he whispered. Arthur answered quietly. "Shell companies connected to offshore accounts. Most of the transfers originated from family trust assets under Michael's management." Vanessa laughed again, but this time the sound carried panic beneath it. Anyone could fake documents. Ryan ignored her completely as he opened another folder labeled Private Investigation. Inside were photographs. Vanessa entering the Brooklyn property repeatedly over several months. Vanessa meeting with accountants Michael had never authorized. Vanessa carrying folders from Michael's office into her car while I attended a charity fundraiser in Connecticut last winter. My chest tightened painfully as each image appeared on the screen. Not because I still doubted the truth, but because betrayal becomes unbearable once it gains details. Ryan's breathing grew, uneven beside the laptop. "Vanessa," he said slowly, "why would Dad have investigators following you?" "Because your father became paranoid before he died," she snapped instantly. He was old, stressed, confused. The cruelty of those words hung in the air for a moment. Michael, reduced to paranoid and confused now that he could no longer defend himself. Something cold settled inside me then. Not grief anymore.
Clarity.
Ryan opened the final folder on the flash drive. Video files. One timestamp from just 4 months before Michael's death. Arthur looked toward me carefully. "You may not wish to watch this." But I already knew I had to. Ryan clicked the file open. The video quality was grainy, clearly recorded from a distance inside some office lobby. Vanessa stood near a reception desk speaking with the same dark-haired man from the photograph Michael had hidden. Their conversation had no audio, but the body language alone told enough.
Documents exchanged. Hands.
Vanessa signed papers. The man handed her a thick envelope. Then she smiled in a way I had never seen before. Confident. Triumphant. Ryan stared at the screen in disbelief. What is this? Vanessa's composure finally cracked. You are seriously going to believe some creepy surveillance footage over your own wife? Her voice had risen now, sharp and defensive. Ryan looked up slowly. Then explain it. I do not owe anyone explanations, she snapped. Your father hated me from the beginning. Arthur spoke quietly from across the room.
No.
Michael trusted you completely at first. That is why it took him so long to understand what you were doing. Vanessa turned toward him with open fury. You should not even be here. Arthur's expression never changed. Michael asked me to stay close to Evelyn if something happened to him. The room fell silent again after that. Outside the windows, gray afternoon rain drifted across the Hudson, while boats moved slowly through the water below. Everything inside the apartment suddenly felt exposed beneath that cold light. Ryan leaned back heavily in his chair and rubbed both hands across his face. He looked exhausted. Older somehow. Was any of it real? He asked quietly, without looking at Vanessa. She stared at him for several seconds before answering. Ryan listened to me carefully. Your mother has been manipulating this entire situation because she cannot handle losing control of the family. I almost admired how quickly she adapted. Even cornered, Vanessa still reached instinctively for control, for confusion, for emotional pressure.
But this time something had changed.
Ryan no longer looked uncertain. He looked heartbroken. Dad was investigating you before he died, he whispered. He left evidence everywhere. Vanessa's eyes shifted briefly toward me then.
Not anger this time.
Calculation. She was trying to decide how much I knew, how much Michael had discovered, how dangerous I had become. Slowly, I folded Michael's letter and placed it carefully back inside the envelope. Then I looked directly at Vanessa for the first time since this entire nightmare began. You spent years convincing me I was becoming weak, I said. Quietly. But the truth is, you only needed me to feel weak long enough to stop asking questions. Vanessa opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, Ryan suddenly closed the laptop hard enough to make everyone flinch. I want the truth, he said, his voice breaking slightly. All of it. Vanessa did not answer Ryan immediately. She stood near the kitchen island with both arms folded tightly across her chest while rain continued sliding down the apartment windows behind her. For the first time since I had known her, she looked cornered. Not frightened exactly. Calculating. Like someone mentally searching for the fastest escape route from a collapsing building. Ryan remained seated beside the closed laptop, staring at her with an expression I had never seen on my son's face before.
Betrayal changes people quietly, at first.
It drains warmth from their eyes before they even realize it themselves. Ryan, Vanessa said finally, her voice softer now, your father never accepted me. You know that. That is not true, Ryan answered immediately. Dad loved you. Vanessa laughed bitterly under her breath.
No.
He tolerated me because of you. Arthur remained silent near the windows while I watched everything unfold with an almost strange calmness. The shock had passed hours ago. What remained now was clarity. The kind that arrives too late to save a family, but just in time to save yourself. Ryan slowly stood up from the dining table. Did you take money from Dad? He asked quietly. Vanessa looked away toward the river. It was complicated. Those 3 words seemed to break something inside him. I watched his shoulders lower slightly, as if years of certainty had suddenly become too heavy to carry. Complicated, he repeated softly. You moved money through fake companies. You lied to us for years. You tried to convince Mom to sell her home. Vanessa's composure cracked again. Because your mother was sitting on millions while acting helpless all the time. The apartment went silent after that sentence. Even Vanessa herself seemed startled by the bitterness that slipped out so openly. I felt the words land inside my chest, cold and sharp. All those months of gentle concern, the soft voice, the careful hugs, the endless conversations about retirement communities and stress and safety. Beneath all of it had been resentment. Not love.
Not family.
Just resentment wrapped in politeness. Ryan stared at her in disbelief. You thought my mother was pretending? Vanessa exhaled shakily and rubbed her forehead. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is watching someone sit inside a 5-story townhouse while everyone else works themselves sick trying to survive Manhattan?
I almost smiled then.
Not because anything felt amusing, but because suddenly I understood everything. Vanessa never saw the townhouse as our home. She saw it as an obstacle, an inheritance waiting for permission to become hers. Arthur finally spoke again, his voice calm and steady. Michael updated his estate protections 6 months before his death. Vanessa's head snapped toward him instantly. What? Arthur reached inside his coat and handed Ryan another document from the envelope. The townhouse, family accounts, and trust assets were placed entirely under Evelyn's control. Permanent protections were added preventing any transfer without her direct authorization. Vanessa's face lost all color. Ryan read the document slowly, while his hands trembled. Dad changed everything? Arthur nodded. He became concerned someone would pressure Evelyn after his death. A long silence followed. Then Ryan lowered the papers and looked toward me with tears gathering in his eyes. Mom, he whispered painfully, why did you not tell me any of this sooner? I looked at my son carefully, the little boy who used to fall asleep beside me during thunderstorms, the teenager Michael taught to drive along empty roads in Vermont, the grown man standing in front of me now, finally realizing his marriage had been built on manipulation he never fully understood. Because your father was trying to protect you too, I answered softly. Vanessa grabbed her coat from the chair beside the doorway with sudden jerking movements. I am done sitting here being treated like some criminal. Ryan looked at her with heartbreaking exhaustion. Vanessa, please stop lying. She froze for a moment. After that, then, without another word, she walked toward the apartment door and disappeared into the hallway. The silence she left behind felt enormous. Months later, winter settled over Manhattan in soft gray waves. Ryan moved into a temporary apartment downtown while lawyers quietly untangled the financial damage Vanessa left behind. The townhouse remained mine. Michael's office stayed exactly as he left it. Sometimes at night, I still sat there reading his old notes while snow drifted outside the windows. One afternoon in December, I returned alone to the little cafe where Arthur first handed me the envelope that changed everything. I sat beside the window with my coffee warming my hands while people hurried past outside beneath umbrellas and winter coats. For the first time in years, I no longer felt invisible inside my own life. Michael had not left me answers. He had left me the truth. And sometimes the truth does not destroy a family. It reveals that the family was already broken long before anyone finally admitted it.